So I've been an iPhone user ever since they introduced the iPhone. I've not even thought for 1 second that I could ever own an Android device. But I've just bought an Android device and I'm gonna tell you why. Apple's event was absolutely shocking this year, and I've been one of them guys that have really looked forward to my Apple events. Actually, even been really excited with my Apple events, and this year it felt really weak. So what I did was I bought a Z Flip 5. There's loads of videos out there that will already tell you about kind of iPhones, Z Flip 5s, all that kind of stuff. But what I wanted to kind of really hunker down on today was the actual process, especially if you've been such a heavy iPhone user like me, coming over to Android and Samsung, and how that whole thing works. So first we start with the unboxing, and the unboxing is very Apple-esque. And I think that Apple actually set the standard with this, you know, kind of being eco-friendly, minimal packaging, and not including the power brick. And you get a box, then you've got your power cable, your SIM opening tray tool, and the phone itself. Next up is the setup. So the setup was pretty basic, to be fair. I thought it was going to be a lot more involved and maybe having to kind of sign myself into certain things, but I didn't have to do any of that. I kind of put a cable between the two and they interacted pretty well. The only problem that I had was with the WhatsApp app, where it didn't quite get all my conversations over, which was strange because some of my conversations were there, but some of them weren't. So that's one thing to bear in mind if you're a heavy WhatsApp user. One of the biggest things that I noticed about coming over to Android was the customization, the keyboards, the UI, the wallpapers. Almost everything is customizational. And that wasn't something I was used to, because with Apple, you are very restricted on what you can do. Yeah, I like it. One thing I didn't recognize at first coming over to a flip phone is the technology is completely different. The screen's different, the thickness of the phone's different, the cameras are different. So that's one thing we've got to bear in mind with this comparison here. But one thing I will say that I did really like on the iPhone was the authentication from doing Face ID. There's so much you can do with Face ID in terms of like kind of buying apps, paying for things on your phone. And because the Samsung in the flip version, can't necessarily talk about the top end phones here, was that the face unlock feature is nowhere near as good, and they know this, and this is why your face unlock will only unlock your phone. You can't make purchases, use your cards or anything like that online. That's a big drag. So expect to be entering your passwords and doing them kind of things if you're making purchasing online. One of the main reasons for this is because you don't have LiDAR sensors and all the other kind of bits and bobs that you have on the iPhone. So it's not as good with the Face ID as the iPhone is. But one thing that's very different, which I like on the Samsungs, is that not only do you have Face ID, but you also have fingerprint ID. So if you didn't quite get the angle right on the Face ID on your iPhone, you'd end up having to type in your password. But on the Samsung, you can actually still use fingerprint ID, which I think on the Samsung, especially this Samsung, is pretty damn good. And it actually probably works faster than Face ID, to be fair. But we kind of knew to expect this, because there is a bit of a trade-off using one of these flip phones as opposed to kind of a normal everyday phone. In fact, I'd even go as far to say as the selfie camera on the internal side of the flip phone is not good at all. But when you have this front screen, it kind of allows you to use the rear cameras to take selfies, which when you compare the rear cameras to the front facing camera on the iPhone, it's actually better. We knew that we were going to have to take a hit with the cameras when it came to selfies and stuff, but I'd actually say if you use the front facing screen, your selfies are actually better than iPhones. But at the same time, you're not able to frame yourself quite the same as you would with an iPhone either. So again, there's a trade-off. One thing that I was really looking forward to was flex mode, where you use the bottom part of the display as kind of a trackpad and the top half as your display itself. Now this is good, but one problem I found with this is if you try and scroll through some text or something like that, you find yourself scrolling a hell of a lot more. Because the display is so small, it's actually really hard to watch content, and you've kind of got to lean into it a little bit so you can see what's going on. I actually found myself actually flipping the phone on its side and watching content like that, just so I could see what was going on. But then I was interrupted by the crease. And if you have any kind of angle on things, you're gonna get kind of light reflections coming in at the center of the screen, which is actually really annoying. The next thing was the battery, and I really did expect a lot less battery life. And yes, I would say that the Samsung spends a lot more time on the charger than its counterpart, but the whole situation with the front screen giving you notifications rather than lighting up the full screen, and also taking your attention away sometimes. You know when you do that thing where you'll get a notification and you'll lose yourself in an app? Because the front screen is so restricted as to the information it gives you the information that you need that you can walk away with. So you use the battery a lot less, which is kind of pretty crazy. The main thing that I've got to draw down on this is kind of the ecosystem that you've got with Apple. You know, things like AirDrop, things like taking a picture on your phone and they're available on your iMac. And because I'm a Mac user, this was a bit of a problem. However, there are a couple of things that you can do to work around this. There's a system called AirDroid and Snapdrop, and they're pretty close to kind of AirDrop. It takes a few more steps to get them files over to your Mac, but they're pretty close. The AirPods as well are a bit of an issue for me. You haven't got the auto pause when you take the AirPod out of your ear, you know, to listen to what someone is saying. But I'd say that that's kind of bad, but not bad enough to sway the scales. The other two things are the speakers, which are nowhere near as bassy as the iPhone is, and they don't have that same clarity. But again, you're probably going to expect that with this being such a thin phone. And lastly, it gets very hot if you're using a Wi-Fi or it's even on charge and you're using the phone at the same time. But only time will tell. It's early days right now, but make sure you subscribe and I'll keep you up to date on this situation. See you in the next one.